Welcome to the Social Engineer Podcast, the SE Etc. series. This is episode 192. I'm Chris Hadnagy, CEO and founder of Social-Engineer LLC, as well as the Innocent Lives Foundation and the Institute for Social Engineering. And what's the date? Oh, Patrick, I've been hosting this podcast since I was a wee young man. 2009. Can you believe that? I'm old.
That's a long time.
That's when we were chiseling podcast on stone. That's how long ago that was. And as you know, with this episode, this series, I am co-hosted with Mr. Layer 8 himself, Patrick Laverty. Thanks for being here.
Hey, it's so awesome to be here. My name is Patrick Laverty. I am part of the Social Engineer team, where I work with a team of professionally certified social engineers doing phishing engagements, doing vishing engagements. But there's also another type of social engineering engagement that I think we wanted to talk about today, which, Chris, after some other introductions, I think you'll get into a little bit.
Man, you're always leading in, Patrick. Yeah. That's one of your strong suits. But yeah, okay. So let's get a
softball for you.
Well, you do a good job at that, especially when it's about clutch. But we'll get to that in a second. Let's do some quick housekeeping. This show is sponsored by Social-Engineer LLC. So if your company is looking to secure your human firewall, meaning that you are worried about being attacked by phone attacks, email attacks, SMS or mobile devices, or even in-person type of attacks, whether that's on social media or in real life, you should definitely check out our website, social-engineer.com. We have a plethora of services there that you can check out, that we help many companies around the globe secure their human firewall by auditing, testing, and educating their people. We also have a full line for next year, 2023. Is this podcast actually in 2020? I don't even know. I think this is December still. I can't tell what date it is, but the whole training schedule for 2023 is out. So we have an APSE class in January. We have an online SIRA class that's brand new. Actually, one of our guests today will be teaching that part of that class. So that is a social engineering risk assessment class. And we have our OSINT class, which will be online. All those dates, you can find it on social-engineer.com. If you are a social engineering enthusiast, you definitely want to check out our Slack channel. We have now, I think it's about 1,300 people in there last I saw. And we have a job board. We have 9 people find employment. We have a group that gets together once or twice a month and does practice sessions. And we have group chats, family-friendly chats involving everything to do from just the basics of how to communicate with others down to pretext development and help with jobs that people will be doing in the social engineering field. If you can find the Slack link in the show notes, or you can hit me up or hit Patrick up on Twitter, we'll be more than happy to get you that link. Patrick is way more active in there than I am, so you can come and hang out with him and chat about social engineering. Also, I want to invite everyone who's listening to, it is a fun time. It is, and you keep it good. And it is family friendly. Remember that. So if that sounds like you, join us. I want to invite everyone that is listening to check out innocentlivesfoundation.org. Our nonprofit over there is doing some amazing things. And as we close this year out, I am really proud to say that we are up near 470 plus cases that we have submitted to law enforcement in the last 5 years of working with ILF. I'm really proud of the folks over there and what they're doing. Our mission, in case you're not familiar with it, is to help federal and local law enforcement agencies find people who are trafficking children, harming children, or creating child abuse material. We help locate them by using non-hackery means, which means we're not doing anything below the law. We stay above the law. We're not breaking the law. We're working with law enforcement to geolocate people who are doing these crimes and then get them apprehended. You can support us by being a volunteer if you have talent that you'd like to volunteer for the ILF, or you could support us through donations. And we invite everyone, if you want to become a hero, you could check that program out on innocentlivesfoundation.org, which leads us into our final, which is if you are listening to this podcast not on YouTube, so if you're on Spotify or iTunes, one of the other audio members, then you are hearing some of the best rock and roll tunes on the planet Earth in the intro and outro, and that's because you're hearing Clutch. If you're not familiar with Clutch, you should go slap yourself right now. Look in the mirror and do it. Just hit yourself. It's the only way to get clear of this. Then jump over to pro-rock.com. Listen to all the Clutch on Earth, and you will be the happiest person that has ever lived. Not only because they are the best rock and roll band, but also Neil and the whole band is big supporters of the ILF. Actually, Neil's been a part of it since almost the very beginning. He's been fighting the fight with us, helping us stop child predators. So we love Clutch for their music, but love them even more for what they do helping save children all over the globe. So you can check them out there. Okay, Patrick, that's all the housekeeping and announcements. So normally you are the master of ceremonies. You choose the topic. What is our topic for today? I know we talked about it at the end of the last month's SE Etc. series, but tell me again, what are we talking about?
Yes. And I think in previous episodes, we have said that the Social Engineering Etc. or the SE Etc. podcast is really like the dumpster dive of podcasts, where you have 3 other weekly podcasts, where one of them you speak to like a leader around the world, another one where you talk to experts in the information security field. You have the one with Dr. Abby Moronio, where you're talking about psychological issues, or what's the right way to phrase that, in the degree that she always like?
Yeah, we're just talking about the psychology of social engineering. Yeah, I think that's right. You did good with that. So this is like the dumpster. This is the dumpster of all SE then.
Because
it's not very flattering.
Non-specific. We can talk about anything that we want. So we thought we have a whole lot of fun to talk dumpster diving and really bring in a guest. So without really spoiling it so much, but that's a little bit of a hint about what we're going to talk about today. We wanted to talk a little bit with our friend, Shelby Dacko. Welcome, Shelby.
Hey, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
So Shelby and dumpster diving. I mean, it's not very flattering, Patrick. You just said this was the dumpster podcast, and then we invited Shelby as our first guest ever on the SE Etc.
Match to me.
Shelby's a perfect match for dumpsters.
I just wanted to leave people hanging on wondering what is going to be the connection, but trust me, we're going to get to that.
Well, let's leave them hanging a little bit longer. Let's talk about actual dumpster diving, because we get this question a lot in training. Like, is dumpster diving legal? Can you actually do it?
And do you literally do it? Do you literally jump into a dumpster?
Well, the last part, the answer to that is yes, 100%. I love dumpsters. They're magical places filled with wonderful things. Now, I can't answer the legal question. Let me do a disclaimer. We are not lawyers, and you should consult your lawyers for actual legal advice on what is allowed and not allowed in the place that you live. End disclaimer. But I can tell you in America, from what we know in dealing with our clients, that as long as a dumpster is on the property, it's either on public property or on property that you were given permission to audit, then you are allowed to dive in said dumpster. As long as it is part of your, what's the magic word, Shelby? The Bible of every job.
As long as it's part of your scope.
Yes, the scope, right? So we have to have it written in the scope. And I have a lot of times people will say, well, do you really have to write everything? For me, yes. And I think it was just a couple years ago, we saw a couple auditors get arrested. And it was nothing to say with them. It wasn't their fault. It was just a very aggressive cop. But later on, they found out they could have had some other things written that could have maybe saved them some of that headache. So for us, it's everything you want to touch, everything you want to do, everything you want to think about has got to be in that scope. But I don't know. Let me see. Have you done dumpster diving, Patrick?
I have not. Certainly not as part of this job. I do remember, I can tell a little mini story about being back in college. I actually worked at a pizza place, and part of working at the pizza place was largely because I was a really poor college student. So I figured that's an easy way to get food. And lots of times at the end of the day, I would go out back to the dumpster where there were some of the pizza mistakes that happened, of course, accidentally, and bring those home. But that's about the closest I've ever come to actually getting into a dumpster.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. We've, I think I've probably told this story before. Ryan and I once, on a job, we had permission to get into any dumpster that was not locked. For some reason, that was their only stipulation. So there were 6 dumpsters, and 4 of them were locked. And we're like, darn. I mean, and of course, the ones that are locked are labeled all the juicy stuff that we would want, like technology, shred, all this. And then the last 2 was like, one was filled with like wood and it looked like scraps, and then the other was, of course, the food and nasty dumpster. And that one was unlocked. So we had these flashlights that did black light, and we were shining it in there, and I'm using this stick from the other dumpster, and I'm moving garbage around, and like a beacon of holy light from the bottom of this dumpster, this brightness flashes back at us, and it's basically just a bag full of white paper. We're like, what's this doing in a food dumpster? So if it was too far down, so of course, we play rock, paper, scissors, and I win, as always when I'm on these jobs, and Ryan had to go in the dumpster head first. I did hold his feet, so he didn't have to fall in. So he went in and he grabbed the bag, and lo and behold, it was a 50-gallon bag of single directional shred. Single directional shred. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. And it had everything. It had not only all the stuff in the organization, but sadly, it had people were bringing their personal things in from home, shredding their credit card bills, their mortgage statements, their, college statements. And we just Ryan and I every night went back to the hotel. We would spend 4 hours putting shred back together, and then the next day get back to breaking in places. And that proved to be really, really valuable.
So that really just becomes your multi-piece jigsaw puzzle of putting all that back together.
It does. I mean, you have to have people that like to do that because it's time consuming, and but you get motivated when you find just like one little piece. You're like, wait, that's a statement of some kind, and now you're like, oh, I'm really excited. I want to keep going, and then you keep going with that, and that kind of keeps your motivation going. But just to kind of like get that question out of the way, people always ask like, can you do it? Get it in your scope, make sure it's legal in the area that you're in, right? So I know in the States, a lot of areas it's legal, but you want to make sure it's in your scope, and you want to, and then from a personal, aspect, you want to make sure that you have things like gloves. I would be wearing steel toe boots or some kind of construction boots, because you never know. I mean, you don't want to jump in a dumpster with flimsy sneakers on and you step on a nail, right? And that would be the worst place to actually be punctured. Full pants, some kind of long sleeve shirt, you definitely want all of that, because you just don't know. And one of the other tricks, and you'll look stupid as heck, but you want to take your socks out of your boot and tuck your pants in them. That's a big trick, because, little insects or rodents love to run up nice warm places. So if you're standing in a dumpster and all of a sudden you kick the food bag over and like 50 roaches come running out, the first place they're running, and I'm telling you this from personal experience, they will run up your pant leg. And when you have those kind of insects running up your pant leg, you start punching places not thinking about what you're punching. And it hurts. I'm just going to tell you. We'll just leave it at that. This is a family-friendly show, but I'm sure you can imagine. Yeah. So after that, I realized I need to have the bottom of my pants somehow covered. And then I started beekeeping. And one of the tricks they teach you with beekeeping is tuck your pants in your socks, and the bees won't ever get to crawl up your pants. I'm like, that's genius. Started doing that on dumpster dives. And now you don't have to worry about rodents or insects crawling up your pants. Yeah. That's a story I heard from a friend.
So what I'm hearing is I'm never going to have to go in a dumpster, right, Chris?
No, I'm telling you all this to prepare you, Shelby. To prepare. Well, actually,
the roaches, though.
Oh, roaches are not fun. They're really gross.
No, I've had to look in a few dumpsters, but they were empty, so I didn't have to actually get in the dumpster. Yeah. So that's an experience I've not had yet.
Yeah.
I've had close to that experience.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if you ever get it. We'll see what happens. You never know. I'll just say, have an open mind, Shelby.
Oh, I just know the next dumpster we see that's open, you're going to be like, Shelby's the one that's going in.
Yeah. I mean, listen,
I'm expecting it fully.
It's what's a little roach amongst friends. From what I hear, they're like little lobsters. That's what they taste like. That's what I heard. That's what I heard. I don't know.
You can try it out and let me know.
Maybe someday. Anyhow, let's get back to the story at hand. The reason that you're here, Shelby, because there is a story involving you and a dumpster or a garbage receptacle that we kind of need to hear.
We also should let people know who Shelby is.
Oh, man. Do we not do that?
Yeah,
we probably should.
Right, Pat. I skipped right over all of that.
I mean, that's because we know who she is. So we're like, what? Everyone knows who Shelby is.
That's right. So Shelby, who are you?
Hey guys, my name is Shelby Dacko, and I'm a human risk analyst with Social-Engineer. So I do a lot of the on-site work. Vishing work is what I specialize in, phishing work and smishing. So a lot of the attack side of the different attacks that you hear Chris and Patrick talk about.
And at the beginning, we also talked a little bit about the phishing and smishing. And there's also another type of engagement, which the dumpster dive is often a part of, which is involves impersonation and involves getting access. So is that something that you've also gotten to do, Shelby?
It is something that I've had a little bit of experience in. So I joined the company right before COVID. And fortunately, I was able to get to go on this really extensive job right before everything kind of went crazy in the world. And it was pretty incredible. And I think that's what I'm here to talk about today.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about any of those engagements that you've ever done? Or I think you've probably been on at least one of those impersonation and break-in types of engagements.
Yeah, so this specific job, it wasn't just one building that we were trying to get into. We had, I think, what was it, Chris? 9?
We did. We had 9 in a week.
Yeah, 9.
Fortunately, all in the same location, but it was still a lot of buildings.
It was, yeah. So kind of daunting for a first timer to think, well, okay, we don't only have one building that we need to break into, but we have 9. And our main goal was just to get access to these buildings. So we weren't planting anything inside or anything like that. So it was kind of nice. I had one goal to really focus on. But our week started out a little bit chaotic because, like I said, I joined the team right before COVID. And Chris actually was supposed to come on this job and he got sick.
Yeah.
And this was at the kickoff of COVID. So he didn't know if it was COVID, if it was something else, but either way, he didn't want to get any of us sick. So Ryan came with us and we had another team lead that was there as well, who was experienced in these impersonation jobs. And he ended up having a family emergency and having to leave. So poor Ryan was left with 4 of us, people who are absolutely new at this job, and he is stressing because, again, we have 9 buildings to get into. So the week started off a little bit chaotic, and it was definitely an interesting first few hours on site.
I forgot about all of that. That's a great outlay for it because there was a lot of stress going into that job. Plus, it was it February or March, or was it March or April?
It was, I want to say March.
It was March because it was still cold because this was in a northern state. Mm-hmm. So it was still very cold. I remember that. And I got deathly ill, which I to this day still think it was COVID, and was not about to get on a plane and thinking, well, that's okay. Ryan's got this other team leader there. It will be good. And then that family emergency, and he ended up being gone. Yeah. And then it was 4 of you having to do all of this job with just Ryan. And the fortunate part was this was not an armed facility. So we should mention that this was not armed, because I know a lot of the stories we tell, the facilities are armed. So we weren't worried about any of our new folks getting into a situation where maybe they were going to get harmed. Right. But there was 9 buildings across a pretty good distance on this big campus. So if you get caught at one and stopped, there was a likelihood that they're going to spread the word. So it was like a really hairy beginning of the week, having to try to organize, how are we going to do all this and not get caught?
Yeah, definitely. It was, I still remember our conversations. We're sitting around and we're planning, and I have a little bit of an anxious personality, right? Especially around things that are unknown to me. And so this was definitely a big unknown. I was really excited for it, but I just remember we were sitting there and planning, and then we did a little more planning, and I love that, but I just look at Ryan at one point and I said, can we get started? Can we go? Because I think we've planned everything that we can. And he's looks at everyone else, and everyone's like, yeah, let's do it. So we left and yeah, we just jumped right in.
I love that part because we had a lot of OSINT going into that job. Which was essential, I think. There's obviously we can't talk about the pretext because that would maybe give away too much. But in this particular job, OSINT really helped us win because you guys came up with a couple pretexts because you found devices that this company used that, literally you can't make this stuff up how lucky we got. There was an update for a particular type of time clock that they used that had just happened like 2 or 3 weeks previous to us being on site, or 2 or 3 months or something to us being on site. So it was perfect timing for us to say we were sent out to make sure that the clocks took the update properly. And it made just like the pretext was a perfect sense for allowing someone to just roam around the building without having to be super technical or having a bunch of tools where they're literally just to check these clocks. So I thought like that's a really valuable part of the story, is that the amount of OSINT you guys did. I can't remember how long, but we spent considerable days on OSINT, didn't we, before we even started?
We did. It was quite a bit. It was. And it definitely aided us in getting in. And we tried a few different pretexts, and really that one was the most advantageous for us.
Shelby said one of the goals for this engagement was to get access to the building. Is that typical for these types of engagements? What are some of the typical goals that you see for this type of engagement?
Yeah. So mainly it is access nowadays. You know, a lot of times outside of manufacturing, most organizations don't want us to disrupt workflow. Like they don't want us to take a server out or stop people from being able to work, take the network down. Gaining access to secured areas of the building is enough to say, boy, if Shelby was really a malicious person, she was in these 5 places within your building. She could have stolen this, destroyed that, taken out this network. She could have done all these terrible things. And they don't need us to do it to prove it. It's just, here's a picture of Shelby standing in the server room, right? Done. Okay, we're good. In this particular job, there were some limitations though, and this was interesting, which does happen often. There was a particular area on one floor that we were not allowed to enter even by mistake. It was like one of those things where they said, if you even go in this room, even if you make a mistake, you just make a right turn instead of a left, job's over. You're out, right? Like whatever was in that area was something that was proprietary to them, and nobody outside with the clearance was allowed in that. So they were like, you know, and they gave us very specific indicators of what the door looked like, the number on the door. So that way we don't even try to pick that lock. We're not allowed to steal keys for that lock. And that's a really important part of these jobs for us. And we ask that question when we're saying, is there any place in these buildings that we're not allowed to go to? And it's amazing how many times when we ask that question, like, oh, yeah, I'm glad you asked that. Here's the rooms you should not enter. And it would be a different story if we never asked that question. And then we're in that room and we got pictures and they're like, oh my God, you weren't supposed to be in there. Like you have to delete all of that. Like you can never talk about, you know, and there's all these things. So, for the team that was there, it was really important that they all knew which building and which area that was, because entering that could have killed the whole job.
Now, there's also times when a client shares a building and they might even have an outside contractor that handles security. Is that sort of thing ever a concern when going on these engagements?
Yeah, a lot of buildings, I think even in this particular job, security was handled by a third party. They hired that third party, but they weren't employees of the actual business that we were hired to breach. But security was hired by a third party. Actually, Shelby, you guys found something pretty interesting on one of your nighttime entries.
We
into
did.
one of those buildings.
I almost feel bad talking about it.
I know, me too.
Yeah, do you want me to go ahead and put it out there anyway?
Yeah, do it.
All right,
do it.
we have to now.
We'll put a caveat out there after you do, but I think it's important to talk about.
It is really important to talk about. I agree with you. Spoiler, we successfully completed our job, right? We were able to get into all 9 buildings, and we did that during the course of the daytime. And so we really wanted to try a nighttime excursion. So we sent a small team in, and then they let the rest of us in. So we have, I think, 5 people in this building at night, which, as you can imagine, it's not many people are in that building. We're walking around and we're taking a bunch of pictures, and no one is asking for our badges or anything like that. And we walked past this one security guard probably about 5 times, but the 6th time we walked past, we see that she had fallen asleep. So she had Netflix on her iPad, and her head was down on her desk, and she was just completely passed out. So that was not ideal, as you can imagine, for that being her job. But I think it's important to mention, because this is something that not only puts the building at risk, but it could have put her at risk as well.
Yeah. These are important parts. We never, we'll never be the company that's like, oh, she was so dumb. That's not the case. Most likely she either received some disciplinary action. Hopefully we suggested they train her or they find out why, and if the reason that she fell asleep was just because she didn't care about the job, then yeah, right. She might not be the right person for that job. But if she fell asleep because she's a single mom taking care of her only kid all day and then came to work, and is there something they can do to help her out, like give her a different shift, So we presented that to them because don't just assume that this woman fell asleep so she's the worst, try to figure out why before you determine what action needs to be taken. But like Shelby said, it's really important because the team was in and out of that turnstile. At one point, they were going to try to breach a secure door. And they walked all the way to a truck dock, grabbed a metal ladder, carried it past her again, and set it up against the wall and was trying to climb up through the ceiling, which sadly we couldn't get through there because it had a firewall. But they had all of that process going, and the security guard never woke up. So that is a massive problem when you think about security for an organization, that 5 people could be doing all of that. And yet we still really wanted to get past that door, and we tried everything. I think they tried lock picking that door. You tried climbing through the ceiling, but eventually there was a method that was used. That
door was only about 15 feet away from this guard as well. So it was really close. Yeah.
So really allowing you guys to do a pretty, I'm going to say pretty great job, but bad for them, having all that time.
We had an opportunity to do a lot more than we normally would have been able to do. In the daytime, or had she been awake.
Yeah. Now we wanted to get past that door. We needed to get past there because what was behind there was something that was important to us. So eventually you guys went back to that truck dock. And then what happened once you were in there?
Well, we had another door so there were 2 doors that ended up leading to kind of the same hallway. So we went to the second door and we were trying to lockpick it, but it was just taking forever. And at this point we'd been in the building for an hour or 2. We've got 4 completely new people. We're walking around trying to do our thing. Ryan's trying to corral all of us, make sure we're going to the right places. And then you have someone trying to pick this lock, which it was, from what I remember, it was a pretty hefty lock. So it was pretty difficult. And they're working on it for probably about an hour. And we can hear someone on the other side of that door. So at this point, we're all stressing out because we just want to get this win, Yeah. But eventually Ryan walks away. He takes a breath. He starts looking around. And he looks over and he sees that we're in kind of a cafeteria area. And there's this counter that has all these holes in the top that has trash cans underneath it. And so he goes over there and he takes his phone and he shines his phone under the countertop. And the door behind the countertop where you can take the trash can in and out is open. And it opens into a janitorial closet that connects to the room that we were trying to get into. And I see this hole in the countertop, and it's pretty small, right? And I just start thinking, oh no, because Ryan puts his flashlight down there and then he pulls it out and he just slowly looks at me. And I'm like, oh
doing
my
math
word.
in his head, right?
And I just knew I was going in that trash can. Yeah. There was no way around it. I was going in the trash. And
you were the smallest person there.
I was the smallest person on the team. It's true. Yeah. I'm not very, very tall or very coordinated. So I was a little concerned. But Ryan was too nice to offer me up. He was, yeah, he didn't.
I didn't know this part of the story, Ryan.
Yeah. He kind of thought about it and he didn't say anything. And I just look at him and I'm like, do you need me to go in the trash? And he's like, yeah, yeah, we do. So fortunately, one of the other guys on our team was taller and he was able to move the trash can and I was able to get through that countertop without breaking anything, and then open the door for the rest of the team.
Which is just an epic story if you think about it. Your first job, you went down a trash chute.
It was pretty fun.
Yeah.
It was pretty fun. It felt like an Ocean's 11 moment.
Yeah.
You know?
And then once you got into the closet, was that door just wide open? You didn't have to pick anything. It was just led right into where we needed?
Was wide open. It led right where we needed to get. But what we didn't know is on the other side of that was their kitchen. And there had been someone walking around the kitchen. So we were a little worried that we were going to bump into that person. I don't know where they were, but we never saw them. We heard them, but we never bumped into them. So now we have 5 people in the kitchen walking around trying to find that hallway we were trying to access. And what we found was like the loading dock area that you were talking about before. And we found a door that led directly to the room that we were trying to breach the entire evening. So at that point, we're trying everything that we can at that door, trying to lockpick that lock. I remember we were looking around for like metal scraps or pieces of plastic or anything that we could use as like an under the door tool or anything like that. So we were in there for quite a while as well. I mean, I would say we were in there for probably another hour, and they had security cameras everywhere. But again, the security guard was asleep, so we had all the time in the world to just hang out and try to figure that out.
It's always interesting to me when we get to discuss these jobs because, I'm not one that say like I believe in luck fully, but I always am shocked by that story with Ryan and I finding a 50-gallon drum of or bag of single directional shred. We found out later that the week before our job, that the group of people who were using that shredder decided to get rid of it because it was insecure. So threw that bag out and bought a new shredder. It could have happened 2 weeks before and the bag would have been gone. It could have happened a month before, it could have been gone, but it happened two or 3 days before we got there. So that bag was fresh, right? You on your very first job, like honestly, if it was Ryan and I, and we found that, I don't know if we would have been able to pull that off. Neither of us would have been small enough. We would have seen that and been like, crap, now what do we do? Like, how are we going to get through this hole without making the hole bigger or destroying it? So like we get very fortunate to have a diverse team, not only in lots of other diversity, but in size diversity that can fit through these tiny holes to be able to do that. I think
at one point, when we were trying to breach the first door, you're keeping up with us via text and trying to see what's going on. And you actually said, shove Shelby through the door. Shove her through the door. And I'm like, I won't fit. I'm not that small. But then we found something else that I was able to, get in.
See, it was destined. You were destined to be shoved into something at some point during that week.
But that's just part of social engineering. That was a really interesting point you brought out, just the luck or whatever you want to call it aspect of it, because that happens on phishing calls too. I mean, it depends on the emotional state of the other person. A lot of our success depends on how that person is feeling or what they're going through at the moment, or, if someone fell asleep or if somebody left the janitorial closet door open. All of those things play into every aspect of our job. So it's really taking advantage of them that gets you your wins.
Which is an interesting aspect to, let's say, SE teaming or red teaming, is because that one event, like that night that you guys found a sleeping guard, may have been the first time she ever fell asleep. Mm-hmm. Maybe it was the first time that that janitorial closet was left unlocked. Right? We don't know that, but there could have been a bunch of firsts that led to your success that night, which may not have been so successful in other nights. But that doesn't mean that it's any less important, because it could be the same weird circumstance of events the day that it's not auditors that show up, that it's actual real bad guys that want to steal stuff from that organization or that want to hurt people in that organization. And then they find a sleeping guard or, an unlocked janitorial closet. So it's a lot of times when we talk about this, people say like, that's a moment in time test. Yes, that's what any adversarial simulation is. It's a moment in time test, right? Because like, I think you said it perfectly. The human that you hit, depending on their emotional state today, could react way differently, opposite to tomorrow for the same exact scenario. So, and that doesn't negate doing them. It just means that this is why I think it's important for organizations to think about doing these more frequently, even once a year or twice a year, because those moment in time snapshots tell you if there's improvement, or is it always this bad, right? I mean, imagine if we went back to the organization now a couple years later and the security guard is still there and she's still sleeping at midnight. Well, now they haven't taken any of our recommendations and they left their whole organization vulnerable because of that. So it's kind of like going to a doctor and getting your physical and he says, okay, I want you to go home and do these things and see me in 6 weeks. You come back, if nothing's changed, he's like, well, you haven't done anything, so there's no help there. Which I think that's why it's an important part of the testing. As much as we love the fun jobs, what did we talk about the other day, Patrick? Was the importance of report writing.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it's also important. You bring up the value of luck during these, and it seems as though I've talked to so many people who have done these types of engagements. And I remember very early on when I'd hear some of these stories, people would, say these types of things like, the guard was asleep, so I was able to get by, or they left a ladder outside and I was able to use the ladder to climb up to the open second floor window. And the first couple of times you're like, oh, well, that's just luck. If I was to do one of these types of engagements, I might not be so lucky. But over time, when you talk to people about these, it seems like there's a lot of luck involved, which when you start hearing some of these stories, you realize it's not really so much luck. A lot of it is preparation. A lot of it is situational awareness. Shelby was just talking about how they were trying to pick that lock for so long. And then Ryan decided I'm going to go look around. I'm going to go see if there's another way. Ryan had that situational awareness to look around and see, is there something else? So sure, maybe there was some luck about having the guard be asleep, but there was also Ryan being aware of the situation and looking for another way in, which is really helpful during these types of engagements to not really get so laser focused and get tunnel vision, but to really get a good idea of what is going on around you and is there another way? And is that other way later on when you retell the story going to be just seen as luck? Or was it good situational awareness?
Well, I like that that phrase. Situational awareness, I think, is super important in social engineering because I think just what you said with Ryan is a great example. They could have said, okay, guys, we spent an hour in this room. There's someone on the other side walking around. You've been picking this lock. We're obviously not successful. Let's go. That could have been one of the options, right? Where you say, I'm here too long. We got to get out of here before we get caught. But instead, looking for another route is something that maybe not everybody would think of doing, right? And that comes with experience. So maybe if it was just our newer folks there, they might have been like, okay, we tried this, let's go. They might even spend an hour. It might have been like, holy mackerel, this is way too long. Whereas Ryan's like, okay, well, there's no indicators that we're getting caught yet, so we could stay here longer. And then that experience of his helped him to say, well, let me look around for a different avenue. And even the thing you said, like, I know we talked about that story, just finding a ladder that we used for a breach somewhere else. When you find the ladder, we took it, but I didn't know that we were going to need it. So I took it because I thought, well, maybe we'll need this later, right? And it's there, so I'll return it. So we'll just steal it and see if I need it. And then we ended up needing it because that ladder just happened to be like an 18-foot ladder when the fence was like 15 feet. So, it was like a perfect size. So it was like, okay, this ended up being a great steal, right? But we didn't know that at the time. So I think you're right. It's a lot of situational awareness, trying to think about like, how do we use the things that are around us to maybe create success, and think of, and it's almost like the hacker mentality, like using this device in a way that maybe it wasn't intended to be used to prove that there's a vulnerability here. Right. And we've done that so often when it comes to these jobs.
Oh, it's almost like there's 3 steps to it, right? First, you have maybe the luck aspect. And then you have the situational awareness, and then you have the skill that comes in with the experience that you've had and knowing how to use the 2 things prior to your advantage.
And I'll add a fourth to that, boldness, because a lot of times, and you said it in the beginning, you were like, okay, Ryan, we did enough planning. Can we just go do it now? Right? Where you could sit there and you can be planning for so long, you never move. And not moving, you're never going to have success or failure, right? I mean, you just sit there. So taking that situation where, I think, was this with you, Shelby? Was there another situation on this where like you and one of, I think it was Kurt, were entering the building and Kurt got stopped by security, but they held the doors open for you?
I don't know if that was this one. We did have one of the buildings we were in. We had everyone on our team but me got caught by security. So I was just in the building alone, just walking through offices and taking pictures. And then everyone else was outside with the security team. And we found our point of contact. And then they texted me. They were like, all right, you can come out now.
And that was really an interesting. And again, we can't ever say the 100% why without getting details from the targets. But it's like here, you got a couple guys on the team. Then you have this tiny little female and you're roaming the building and no one cares. And the guys are outside with security getting questioned. And it's a nice part of the report to talk about those biases where they might have seen you and went, come on, what can she possibly do? And little do they know, the night before, you were the one who breached the whole building by crawling through a dumpster hole, right? So it's like that kind of stuff is always that boldness part, I think, is really important because in this job, it helps us to be able to show where vulnerabilities really may exist for an organization. But you wouldn't know it if you just didn't step up and say, I'm going to try this.
And you added that fourth point of boldness, where I would probably now add a fifth point for you, which would be having diversity on the team, where it's not necessarily just the diversity like you just described of having a team of like 4 guys and Shelby, so that you have the visual difference of people. But it is also really about the thought process and how different people from different backgrounds are going to think problems through differently, people with different experiences. Kurt and Shelby have been proven in the past that they think very differently and they attack problems very differently. So if you were putting together a team, you probably couldn't get better diversity than having Kurt and Shelby together on a team, which would infinitely make the team so much stronger. So I think there's a lot of value to really being able to put together a more diverse team, not only in the types of things that you mentioned, like male, female, but also just thought process and background and where people are coming from.
That's a good point. And I know that a lot of people who may be hearing this, they work for companies that they always send out in a singular team. I know you came from a place like that. Ryan did. And that's hard. And I know because a lot of places they're dealing with budgetary constraints to say that, we can only charge this much. So that's why we send one person out. And for us, we charge the same, but we'll take the financial hit and still send multiple people out because it's better for the client and it's better for our team, right? Sending Shelby and Kurt to a job is great for all the 5 reasons we just mentioned, right? And that last one, they will approach the same exact door in such different ways that it will create a scenario for us where we'll have multiple learning experiences for that person, for that company. So I think I think diversity is a really important part of it. If you can swing it, if your company can swing it, and if not, look for ways that you can, right? You can even do things like, this is going to sound like a sales pitch, but come into our Slack channel. We have people in there that don't talk about where the job is or the client, but they'll say, hey, I'm going to be breaking into a financial sector business next week. Here's the pretext. Can someone help me? And I'll see 5 or 6 people jump in that conversation, giving ideas and thoughts and other things. And I think that's wonderful because now you're getting maybe not even cross-gender, but you're getting cross-cultural, cross-country, cross-everything ideas from people who are coming from all over the globe. And you could do that. And I've seen dozens of people do that in our Slack channel.
Patrick and I have done that just for our phishing calls. Some days he'll hop in there and say, hey, what tactic are you using today? And, a few people comment and then it'll give me an idea to kind of change it up, spice it up a little, do that's something cool. I might not normally do.
I love that. And I think that's a nice 5th edition, Patrick. That's a nice 5th edition because that one is something that we push a lot here. And it's good to hear it happening now. And folks out in the SE Slack channel are using that. I've got a bunch of people who ping me and say, man, I used that pretext that you guys all came up with on that last job and it worked really well. That's awesome, right? I've had a couple folks who reached out to me who were writing their college thesis on social engineering and wanted some ideas and help. And we tossed some things around in the channel and they used it and they came back like, hey, we passed with flying colors thanks to that. So it's just, that diversity one's a nice way to round out those thoughts. Well, another interesting story time with you, Patrick, as always.
And of course, this was great to have Shelby with us to
always
learn about some of her exploits.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. Hopefully next time it'll be a story about me hopping in a dumpster.
You see? She said it, Patrick.
Roaches.
You heard it.
Roaches.
You actually, everyone here heard it. Shelby said, hopefully, you heard it. Hopefully next time it will be a story of me going into a dumpster. So now when I put her in a dumpster, everyone, we don't want to hear whining, right? Because she said it.
I will whine if there are roaches, but I will do it because I have to take that fourth point, right? I have to be bold.
Yeah. Well, I think it depends on
zone.
Where we are and when we are, right? If we were doing dumpsters in that place where you guys were, there would have been no roaches because it was cold and they would have all been away, right? But if we're, down here in Orlando or even New York in July, yeah, you're going to have some fun.
It'll be a story.
Yeah.
Up north, it's probably more about the raccoons.
Yeah. Raccoons are rodents, right? New York, the rats the size of cats, Actually, I'd rather see a bunch of roaches than a rat that size. Oof. No way, man. One time I was in Brooklyn, I saw an actual rat carrying a slice of New York pizza down the road. I'm not even kidding. That's not even a story. It was just in his mouth and he was carrying a whole slice of pizza. And I'm like, no one's going to mess with that thing. Like, you know what a New York slice of pizza is? Like, those are a giant slice of pizza. This rat was carrying a slice of pizza. And I'm like, is that a dog? Like, it was like far away. And I'm walking and it's walking up the sidewalk. And I'm like, that's a rat. It's carrying a whole slice of pizza. Like, no, I'm sorry, man. You meet one of those in a dumpster? It is. It doesn't even exist. It's like fake, but no, I don't want to see that in real life. No.
And the rat was even smart enough to get pizza without pineapple on it.
Yeah, exactly. That was just a plain cheese pizza from what I can see. Of course, I didn't, inspect it and have any conversation with the rat, but I'm a big baby when it comes to rodents. So anyhow, enough on that. Thank you, Shelby, for joining us on this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Patrick, thanks again for coming up with yet another fascinating topic.
Yeah,
as always.
It's been a whole lot of fun to have Shelby here and look forward to do this again next month.
Yeah, so next month, I don't know if we have our topic chosen yet, but I'm sure it'll be something really fascinating and interesting that Patrick pulls out of the archives or somewhere like that. And this will be our first SC Etc. Our next episode will be our first SC Etc. in 2023.
That's right.
Can you believe this year is over?
And if people have suggestions on things that they would like us to cover in the future, hit us up. Find us on Twitter. Find us on the Slack. We'd love to hear whatever suggestions that anybody has.
Please, any suggestions? We love them. We're getting a lot of them for the different series. So whatever you want to hear on this series, just send it in and we'll be more than happy to add it. Okay, well, thanks everybody for joining us this month on SC Etc. Thanks to our two co-hosts here sharing their stories, and we'll see you all next month. See you.